67% of Democrats want someone other than Joe Biden to run for president on the Democrat side in 2024. 2/3 of Democrats don't want him, plain and simple. So who are the Democrat alternatives? Articles putting forth alternatives to Joe Biden as a Democrat presidential candidate in 2024. They trot out the usual suspects. Kamala Harris, Governor Gavin Newsom, who we heard earlier, lying. Pete Buttigieg, even the likes of Gretchen Whitmer, you know, the who's who of the deep Democrat D.C. swampness. Heaven help us all. But none of the big corporate media propaganda mouthpieces will dare to put forth the guy actually running. The one who's already put his hat in the ring, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And why? Well, we know this story. The outsider, the one who strays from the political party's agenda, and the line is shunned because being anything other than what the deep state wants you to be automatically deems you a non-factor. You're either ignored or you're vilified by an all too willing leftist corporate media. Joe Biden won't even consider debating RFK Jr. Think about that for a second. A Democrat. Maybe Joe can't stand to face him after Joe plagiarized from Robert Kennedy's speeches back in 1987, the father.
Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry, or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials.
Cannot measure the health of our children, the quality of our education, the joy of their play. It doesn't measure the beauty of our poetry, the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate.
Word for word. And he still does it. He's not plagiarizing, he's lying and making stuff up. You see, when RFK Jr. talks about restoring democracy, when he talks about protecting and solidifying the sanctity of our election process, one of the most important elements of our democracy, it seems to frighten his party. And that's one of the most telling aspects of all. The party of lawlessness and corruption wants to stay exactly the way it is, firmly planted in the takedown of this great country. All right, folks, you know, we are the fastest growing show on cable news, and we have a lot of really, really interesting guests. And I will tell you, of all the people we have on, I think this next guy is of the most interesting people you will listen to. Really listen to what he has to say. He's got some great ideas. Let's bring in Democrat presidential hopeful himself, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Robert, if I may call you that, appreciate your time. You know, we heard a lot of these rumblings. We've been talking about this a long time on this show, that Biden's not going to make it to 2024. I don't think he's going to be the nominee. I just don't think, last minute they're going to say he wants to spend some more time with his family, but so now who? I mean, you're leading all the people who've declared, but how come your name never gets floated by the mainstream media, MSNBC, CNN, the others, in that it's always Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama or Kamala? What are your thoughts?
I think that the DNC and the Democratic establishment would probably rather have Trump as president than have me as the Democratic nominee. And you're right, I'm beating anybody else. I mean, I'm third in line in all the polling numbers after President Biden and President Trump. My numbers are better than anybody, but I am not. And, people who have a fraction of the support that I have, the polling support, like Nikki Haley, who has 1 or 2, 3 points. I have 13 to 30, depending on what poll you look at. She's on CNN almost every day, MSNBC, et cetera. But I'm never on those. I am not invited. I'm not allowed. We ask them to let me on, and they say no. The only show that I've been on in either of those networks was Michael Schmerkanich, and I understand that he got in trouble for allowing me to go on.
Why is that, though?
Jake Tapper.
What are they afraid of,
I don't know.
What are they afraid? You're too good? You show what someone with, I don't know, cogency and coherence might look like as a Democrat as opposed to, the shiny object over there, whatever he is?
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but Jake Tapper actually said on the air after, I think he hosted Nikki Haley and he hosted Governor DeSantis in town halls, but he said on the air, I will never do a town hall with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So I don't know, you know, somebody should ask him, but maybe I have dangerous ideas, or I don't know what the explanation is.
Oh, I do. They're propping up Weekend and Bernie's Joe Biden till the last minute and make the switch out, and you're not part of the Democrat establishment. Let's be honest, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., you're not. Your legacy is your father and your uncle were. They were, wow, Democrat. You know, they'd almost be Republican at this stage with some of the ideas that they have. The left wants to be so radical. Here, what about this idea? Michelle Obama is now percolating, and that was my pick. That, you know, outside of you, I think she'd be their best choice.
I don't know. I mean, I think she'd make a good candidate. I think that would be interesting. But, you know, the more people in it, the better. I think Americans ought to have a choice. There ought to be a debate. There ought to be retail politics. You know, we shouldn't have a candidate who's sitting in the basement and the only people he's talking to are donors. That's not good for the Democratic Party. It's not good for our country. We need some, you know, a debate, and if not a debate, then at least some unscripted conversations with American voters. I'm out on the campaign trail every day, and I'm seeing that, you know, President Biden is selling what he's selling to the American public right now is that he has brought tremendous prosperity to this country, but the people that I'm talking to do not see that. They feel like they're being gaslighted when he says that. They feel, you know, the average salary now in this country is $5,000 less than the average cost of living. So Americans are putting that $5,000 on their credit cards every year. They're paying 22% interest. That money is going up to the real owners of everything, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. And the country is being strip mined, the middle class being strip mined of its wealth and equity. And Americans are, this is the traditional constituency of the Democratic Party, working poor, working Americans, and they've been completely ignored. And if you look now, they've put all these superdelegates in place. You know, the Democratic Party is now making rules to make sure I cannot win the nomination. They're putting these superdelegates in place who are corporate lobbyists, for the most part, from their big donors. They've collected $2 billion. You know, President Trump is the best thing that ever happened to the DNC, because it's like the military-industrial complex needs Vladimir Putin, and the DNC needs Donald Trump to point to a villain that, you know, they can sweep up the money, and they've got now $2 billion to run against me, and I think that they're scared of having a candidate who can actually beat Donald Trump. I think there's people in the Democratic Party who would rather see Donald Trump as president than have me, because they know he's only going to be there for 4 years. They can fill their coffers during that time, and then they'll have 8 years unobstructed. And maybe that's the plan. I don't know. But I know that, you know, you talk to pundits across the political spectrum, and they are, you know, they're pointing to this odd phenomena where the vitriol against me in its intensity exceeds even that from the DNC, from the Democratic establishment. It exceeds that that is directed against Donald Trump. It's not good. It's you know, we need to, what you said a moment ago, Eric, is true that, you know, the Kennedy, the traditional Kennedy democracy, the concerns of Kennedy Democrats have become these items of quaint nostalgia, you know, and the Democratic Party has become the party of war. It's become the party of corporatism, of Wall Street, of pharmaceutical companies, of censorship, of trampling the middle class, and of trampling bodily autonomy, and all of the traditional concerns that drove Democratic Party over the past century and a half are now artifacts of the past.
I will tell you, I think you just answered the initial question, what are they so afraid of? Because you're right. you're right that the Kennedy brand of democracy is very threatening to the swamp, the left swamp, as they got it good, whether it's their turn or Trump's turn or Biden's turn or Obama's turn or whomever's turn. It protects the status quo, and they don't like upending the apple cart as a Robert F. Kennedy Jr. might. You brought up censorship, and you've been the victim of censorship.
The rule, let me just say something, Eric, that the Democratic Party, the DNC, is voting on new rules to govern the primaries. And what they're doing is, and they're voting on that on September 14th, so a few days. But the rules that they have already put in place and are now proposing are designed to make sure that no matter what happens, that I cannot get the nomination. They've already made it so that they've disenfranchised the states that voted against Biden last time. So Iowa, anybody who campaigns in the state of Iowa.
Okay, allow me. And I think you're right. I think the superdelegate, Hillary started it. She wanted it. I get it. I understand what they're up to. They don't want Robert F. Kennedy in the Oval Office. So I'll ask you again. I asked you this last time. You gave me a very short, curt answer. You know, there's another path to the Oval, Robert. There's the vice presidential path under Donald Trump. One term, Robert F. Kennedy would be the odds-on favorite to take the Oval. Would you say yes now in hindsight?
No, I'm not going to say yes to that, but I may look at other alternatives, other routes for taking the White House. I think, I think the American people want real change, genuine change. I think President Trump has had his chance at the White House, and that I think I will actually do what I think Americans want done, which is to take the administration away from the swamp, this corrupt merger of state and corporate power that I think President Trump tried to address, but was unable
again,
to.
You're speaking, you're a libertarian here. I'm loving what you're saying. Robert, very quickly, I don't have a lot of time. Censorship, January 6th. January 6th, we just heard a 15 to 17 and 18 and a 22-year sentence for some of the people that were involved. The 22-year, the guy wasn't even there. Was January 6th, in your opinion, a loud protest, or was it a violent riot? And tell us, would President Robert F. Kennedy Jr. pardon or commute the sentences of those involved that weren't involved in any sort of violence?
Eric, I hear both sides of that story, but I have not delved into it. I did talk to the D.C. police chief because I happened to be in the same room with him the other day. I mean, the Capitol police chief, and he told me some things that I did not know about January 6th that were very, very disturbing to me. And, and I think that those are things that we should all be talking about, and we should all be talking about it in a nonpartisan way.
Well, tell me, can you tell us?
These kind of issues should not be democratic.
Can you give us the spark notes on what the biggest one was?
Well, he felt that it could have been prevented, and that he was turned down when he got wind of the fact that that there was some danger to the Capitol. That he immediately asked that there was, I think, 350, he told me, National Guardsmen within a block or two of the Capitol, and that the whole thing could have been prevented, and that he asked for them to be sent over, and repeatedly asked, and that he was mysteriously denied that request
By Pelosi.
That's one of the many. Well, by his chain of command, I think he did actually talk to Nancy Pelosi, but he talked to his entire chain of command, people in the Pentagon, et cetera, and that people who normally would, in his opinion, would have sent them over. So I don't know, and I really even, I got this secondhand. So, I mean, I guess I got it firsthand from the guy who happened to. I wouldn't be talking about it, but it's not an area, it's not something I've studied.
No, but it's something,
It's something
as
that,
president with the opportunity to pardon or commute sentences, you would at least look into it and find out all the information that we, clearly the public, haven't been privy
I will
to.
find out. I will find out. Yeah, I'll find out all the information on these and many, many other issues.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., again, folks, I'm telling you, keep your eye on that guy, one of the most interesting people around. And in politics today, you got to be smart. You have to have good policy, but you also have to have an it factor. Robert F. Kennedy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.